Welcome to the Action Network studio in New York City. I'm Maria Marino, and this is Green Dot Daily. We're live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action app, and if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. We have a jam-packed show today with picks for the biggest college matchups of the weekend, including Villanova, Maryland on the hardwood and Georgia, Tennessee on the gridiron. But we got to start in the NFL. Injuries have made this already hectic AFC North even more of a toss-up. On Monday, the Bengals were at plus 425 to win the division. That has skyrocketed to plus 3,500 following Joe Burrow's wrist injury. More on that in a second. The shifts haven't been as drastic, with the Browns losing Deshaun Watson, going from plus 230 to plus 450. And despite an ankle injury to Mark Andrews, the Ravens' big win last night easily makes them the favorite. Let's say hello to Stuckey and Chris Raybon. So about 15 minutes before the show, the Bengals were at plus 2,500 to win the AFC North. It's ballooned yet again because Joe Burrow is reportedly out for the remainder of the season. That's according to Adam Schefter. He is likely to require surgery. So first off, Raybon, what's your reaction to the news?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised just given his reaction in the game. I think, when you look at the Bengals, they were already kind of fighting an uphill battle. They really set themselves behind the eight ball, dropping so many games early in the season. So, going from plus 2,500 to plus 3,500, the books were already starting to factor in the possibility, I think, before the news broke that he might be out for the year. But I think this is really good news for the Ravens because unlike the rest of the teams in this division, their quarterback is still upright.
Stuckey, I'm just bummed. I'm just bummed to see one of the great quarterbacks that we're actually privileged to watch this season go down.
Yeah, I agree. This year, I mean, how many more backup quarterbacks do we need on Sundays? We don't need any more, and the league is so much more fun and just better overall when Joe Burrow's playing. So, yeah. Look, I'm a Ravens fan. I didn't want to see this happen. It's terrible, and the league's better with Joe Burrow. And I'm tired of backup quarterbacks. Like, there's just, I mean, the other week we had 9 start on a Sunday. We're headed towards, I don't know, half the league's going to have backup quarterbacks. So, yeah, the one thing I'll say is, look, to Bengals fans and just mainly Bengals fans in general, the Ravens have had terrible injury luck the past 2 years. You just want those seasons where it's just like, look, they've had, Chase hurt, Higgins hurt. Burrow started the year hurt and rusty, and they kind of got behind the eight ball. Bring me all the bad injury luck at once, right? And then get Burrow healthy, ready to go for the start of the year, and they'll be fine. So, yeah, they're completely out of it now. I mean, they're also winless in the division, so you can write them off. I saw their Super Bowl odds go to 100 to 1. I mean, they should be 1,000,000 to 1, but these years stink if you're a fan of the Bengals when you have bad injury luck, and you just got to wait till next year.
Well, speaking of, Raybon, how would you go about betting the division at this point?
Well, I mean, I think this really helps the Ravens, but their odds are, so juiced up now that I don't really see any value in betting them. I think, the teams to look at are the Steelers and Browns. Now, it's two kind of different situations. The Steelers they're in a good position record-wise, but they're fraudulent. They haven't outgained anybody. So, that's that. But then the Browns, they have this elite defense, but just how good is the quarterback situation going to get? Like, what's the ceiling for that? So I would lean Browns just because there is some uncertainty there. Dorian Thompson-Robinson did look good in the preseason. Maybe he improves. Maybe they sign a veteran. Whereas the Steelers, we kind of know what they are and who they are, and they're probably gonna trend downward at some point. So I think the Browns are that sweet spot where the defense is there, and if they get some luck with a quarterback situation, or knock on wood, or maybe the Ravens, maybe it happens to Lamar again and he misses a couple games.
Watch your mouth.
Well, hey, I'm just putting it out there. So I think the Browns, to answer your question, Maria, are probably the best play at this point from a numbers perspective.
And I don't feel good about it, but at least the Browns, sorry, Stuckey, have beaten the Ravens. But how would you approach this division, Stuck?
Steelers have too. The Steelers, look, the Steelers, their voodoo's going to end. They're terrible. I would look at the Browns too. Like, I have the Browns 4 to 1 from beginning of the year, was buying the upside on Deshaun. But now you have the Bengals out of it, and the Browns' schedule is easy down the stretch. So what you want when you're looking at futures like this is you want upside and you want variance, and that's what either DTR, right? He has way more upside than Pickett. We know Pickett is terrible, so maybe DTR can be a flash in the pan, or as Raybon alluded to, maybe they go get a veteran quarterback. So there's upside there with the Browns. You know they have the best defense in the league. The Steelers, they've been the luckiest team in the history of the NFL through 10 weeks. That regression is coming. I would not look at them no matter what. Although their schedule, their luck never ends. They play the Browns this week with DTR. They play the Bengals next week with Browning. They got the Patriots with whoever they're going to be their quarterback. They got the Bengals again. I mean, this just never ends. But it's Browns or nothing.
Well, there's a reason the Steelers have been all over our Action Network luck rankings. Let's move on, shall we? Best bets. Raybon, what do you got?
I like the Rams this weekend catching a point at home against the Seattle Seahawks. The Rams are coming off a bye, and before that, they had that Brett Rippon start where they lost 20-3. So I think they're getting swept on a little bit in the market, but I think they're equal or better team even than the Seattle Seahawks. Matthew Stafford is better in terms of EPA per play than Geno Smith. And in that first game that they played earlier this year, the Rams outgained the Seahawks 426 to 180. They more than doubled them up in first downs. And they didn't even have Cooper Kupp in that matchup. And Geno Smith on the other side of the ball has really struggled against these Raheem Morris defenses, regardless of personnel. Last year at the end of the year, Seahawks had a playoff berth on the line. Aaron Donald was out, and Geno couldn't even get to 200 yards against this defense. And he really struggled again earlier in the year. So I just look at this matchup, and it's one of those situations where the Rams have just been getting the best of the Seahawks. I think their coaching staff it's one of the few coaching staffs that can, out-coach Carroll and his staff, and that they're 6-0 last 6 against the spread, 9-1 last 10 against the spread, and 10-4 overall is Sean McVay going up against the Seahawks and Pete Carroll. So love the Rams this weekend.
So at least we get one starting quarterback back, with Matthew Stafford expected to return a little earlier than expected from that thumb injury. Stuckey, your turn.
Yeah, I agree there with the Rams being the play. But for my best bet, I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns and DTR against the aforementioned Steelers. Look, this is just, all right, let's put these teams on the field. The total is coming down rapidly. I trust the Browns who are at home. I trust the Browns defense, ultimately. I think the Browns are going to go super conservative. There is some upside with DTR, right? He actually got to run with the ones for the entire week. He already got his beak wet. I think the Steelers defense is super overrated. I mean, look back to what everyone said. Oh, Will Levis is going to be a Hall of Famer after playing the Steelers. You've seen Jordan Love all of a sudden has awoken. Is Jordan Love back? So he played the Steelers. Go back to this first game. The Steelers come back in complete luck fashion. They got outgained by almost 200 yards. I trust the Browns defense to make a play here. I expect their defense to rally around the DTR situation. They're not going to ask them to do too much. This is going to be an ugly game. For what it's worth, home teams, I think this is more randomness than anything, but it's fun. Home teams with a total of 34 or less in divisional games over the past 20 years have gone 25-8 against the spread, 76%. The last time we've seen this hasn't happened since 2012, when the Browns, with a bad rookie quarterback, Brandon Weeden, beat the Steelers as a 1-point favorite with a total of 33, thanks to 8 pit turnovers. So that's my game preview. 8 pit turnovers, Browns win.
Very nice game preview. Wait, hold on, Raybon. Why are you shaking your head?
I think. Listen, the Steelers are lucky, but I think people are overthinking this. I still think the Steelers are the side. If you're betting on the Browns, you're laying points with a starter who was the worst starter in the league in his one start. Kenny Pickett hasn't turned the ball over in a month. I mean, everyone's saying that you don't trust the Steelers, but the Browns defense shut out Clayton Tune. But in their other 3 most recent games, they gave up an average of 31 points, 375 yards a game. Gardner Minshew and the Colts scored 38 and got, over 400 yards against them. So I don't really think I can trust the Browns either. and I'm getting points with Pittsburgh. So I think Pittsburgh's the right side here.
You know, another side bet, pick it over 1.5 turnovers.
There you go.
Well, this is obviously a significant game. So why don't we bring Darren Ravel into the fold? Hey, Darren. So you already heard Stuckey talking a little bit about this total. What is the market report looking like for this AFC North matchup?
It's quite obvious. Obviously the public loves this, even though the Steelers are the luckiest team in our luck rankings. They are the number one most bet team. The Steelers are. They are the number one most bet underdog. And the total now at 33 is the most bet under. So most bet game overall, amazing this week, is the Browns Steelers.
And as Stuckey already said, 32 would be the lowest NFL total in a decade. Thank you for that. But let's get to the real reason why you're here, which is the return of Fade Ravel. So Darren, what's your pick?
I think my record is 5-5 now. I can't even count how many I've won in a row.
4-5. You didn't show up last week.
Okay, it's 4-5 then. But let's make it 5-5. This one is so obvious, and I am going to take the Buffalo Bills -7. To me, this is just the Bills are at the lowest of the low. They're 3-7 against the spread, but they've won 2 of those games at home. They're at home. I feel good with them being at home, and I think the Jets, they're not at the height. But I like the 7. I would probably buy back to 6.5, but I know Stuckey wouldn't allow me to. So I am going to do the Bills -7.
Stuckey, your response?
He doesn't hate it.
I'm too sick to get fired up. I mean, look, I don't hate it. I wouldn't lay 7 here. If I could get 6.5, a flat 6.5, I would. Just because Allen has really struggled. I think he has 9 touchdowns and 10 interceptions in his career against the Jets with like 26 sacks. He's really struggled against the Jets.
So you can't buy the low. You can only buy down the high of the Steelers.
Let me finish. I'm saying but on the surface, I think that I said that I'm going to be looking to buy the Bills now. I've been fading them for 5 weeks. Everyone now is looking to sell them. I'll be looking to buy them, but just as a 7-point favorite in a divisional game against a defense you struggle with, not the spot for me. I don't hate it, but I tease the Bills probably, and I'll be looking to, if I like what I see, I'll be looking to back them next week in Philly with the Eagles off that Chiefs game. And at the end of the day, you're fading Zach Wilson, so you got it right with the Giants Bills game with the Bills. So maybe Fade Ravel doesn't apply to Bills games. So
or only when they play shitty New York teams, other New York teams.
Yeah.
But
true.
Raybon, what about you?
I mean, I just don't know how you look at a slate and the pick that stands out is just this 7-point favorite.
Stands out like a sore thumb.
It's not even that you're laying like a ton of points, like you're laying 12, 14, but 7 points. That's such a standard score. It's just like, why? I don't understand how you look at that, and that's the one that stands out. I don't hate it because
when the final score comes down, you'll get it. You'll understand.
I'm gonna say I don't hate it only because there's kind of levels, right? To the Bills offense, they think they're out of sorts, but they're averaging 26 points a game. Meanwhile, the Jets haven't scored a touchdown in 36 straight drives. So, I mean, it's hard to cover a 7 when you can't score touchdowns, no matter how good your defense is. So, I don't hate it, but it's interesting that that's the pick that stood out of all these games on that slate. But
it seems like this is actually the most loved Fade Ravel pick yet.
Because we don't hate it.
Correct. Yes.
By default.
Well, when I saw that we were going to be talking about a historically low total, I have to admit, I was thinking, is it Bills Jets? Because we know the Jets can't move the ball. Bills have had trouble moving the ball, and they're actually playing a very good Jets defense. But we'll see. We'll see if, to Raybon's point, that spread is going to be feeling a little bit high. I guess that's going to do it. Guys, thanks so much for coming and hanging out. Stuckey, we hope you feel better. And Darren, maybe hope you feel good about your pick on Sunday.
Let's get to 500, baby.
That should always be the goal. Thanks to Caldera Lab, we can keep the NFL conversation going. And one important divisional matchup this weekend has the Titans getting the points at Jacksonville. This was a 6-point spread. Line has since moved to 7. Just over half of bets are on the under of 40, but 70% of money is on the over. So it's time for Skin in the Game, presented by Caldera Lab, as we bring in Anthony DeBundo. You like this game to go under 40 points. Tell us why.
Yeah, I think there's some real question marks about both offenses. Trevor Lawrence, as much hype as he's gotten and expected to take this kind of leap this year, it hasn't really been solidified. I mean, they're outside the top 10 in every offensive metric passing wise. They're a very heavy early pass offense. They throw a lot on early downs. And, this is on paper a good matchup for this Lawrence, offense, because they can throw the ball against a pretty weak Titans secondary. But I'm not sure how much time Lawrence is going to have to throw. And I really don't think that the market has caught up to just how average this offense is. Even when they've played well and, put up 37 points on Indianapolis, it was 3.9 yards per play. It was a lot of turnovers. And they played a Buffalo defense that we now know is a bottom 5 unit. They really couldn't do anything until late in the fourth quarter. This Titans offensive line on the other side is an absolute mess. They're a bottom 5 unit. They've been shuffling through guys, trying to find out what works. And when they've had Will Levis back there, they've really struggled outside of a handful of explosive plays. Will Levis this season has been the worst quarterback in the league on well-covered plays by the defense in terms of both creating offense and avoiding sacks. So sacks have been a major problem for Levis. And that's the underbetter's dream is a sack as opposed to those turnovers. Levis hasn't necessarily had a ton of turnovers, but like I said, the sacks have been a problem. He's been bottom 5 in success rate offensively since coming in. Really, it's just been a handful of big explosive plays down the field. And this Jacksonville secondary is underrated. They're a top 5 coverage unit by PFF. I think it's pretty real. So I'm going with under 40 in this one, divisional matchup. Vrabel's generally had the Jags number in these kind of matchups. I think they muddy it up, and this is a close one-score divisional game that stays under the total.
Well, as we know, Jags only scored 3 points last week against San Fran. Hopefully we'll get a few more for entertainment's sake, but keep it under the total for you. What else do you have this week?
I'm going back to the well on my Green Bay Packers for the 3rd straight week. They have really been inconsistent this year. They did beat LA, but then lost, by the hook on a missed extra point last week in Pittsburgh. I'm going back to Green Bay, +3 against the Los Angeles Chargers. The biggest weakness for Green Bay all season, and really it's been the weakness for many years under defensive coordinator Joe Barry, has been their run defense. But that doesn't really matter in this matchup because the Chargers are one of the most pass-heavy teams in the league. Their offensive run game is essentially checkdowns to Austin Eckler. They are one of the heaviest early down pass rate teams, and they are just 31st in rush success rate. So I really don't think the Chargers are going to be able to run it all over this Packers team. You do have Keenan Allen playing through injury. We saw him last week have a ridiculous game, and it didn't seem to matter. But you never know. With AC joint sprains, it could flare up again, and that's potentially leaving the Chargers very shorthanded in their wide receiver room. So that is a potential risk for the Chargers, even though he's going to play. And really, this Chargers defense has not been anywhere close to the unit we've seen in years past. They struggle against the run. They also struggle in the secondary. They're a below average coverage unit per PFF. They are 31st in yards per drive allowed. Only team that's worse is Denver. Remember, Denver had that historically bad defense in the first month. Really, since then, the Chargers on a yards per drive allowed basis have been the worst defense in the NFL. We saw it last week with Jared Goff and company tearing them up. And look, I know Jordan Love has taken a lot of flack and criticism. I actually thought he had a pretty good game against Pittsburgh. Went back, rewatched it, watched it live. Thought he made some really impressive downfield throws. The consistency has not been there play to play, but he's still, finding some highlight plays to keep this one close. And there's so many holes in that Chargers secondary. I think he'll find some success. So give me the Packers +3. I know our Action Network luck rankings. Nick Giffen is probably nodding in approval. Green Bay down at the bottom of the luck rankings. So there are some bounces due to go the way of the Packers here. I just think that this game is pretty close to a coin flip.
I don't know if you necessarily want to call them your Packers, but regardless, they would improve their ATS record to 5-5. It's interesting to hear you talk football. We're going to have you stick around, I should say, and talk college hoops. So hang tight while I share this exclusive deal with our audience, you're not going to beat this offer. Use code GDD at calderalab.com and get 20% off right now. That's 20% off with code GDD at calderalab.com to make unforgettable first impressions with the best gift this holiday season. To college hoops, two of the better matchups on the board tonight. A couple of second-year head coaches square off when number 21 Villanova hosts Maryland in the Gavitt tip-off games. Nova favored by 6.5. Then 9:30 tip from Las Vegas when St. Mary's squares off against San Diego State. St. Mary's are the short favorites. So in addition to Anthony, we now have Michael Calabrese joining us, and we'll be getting both of your picks on the games we just highlighted. But first, let's talk a little big picture. A couple teams that have surpassed expectations early are Colorado and Alabama. Breeze, what are your thoughts on Bama so far?
I mean, they're the number one scoring team in the country. They've played 3 games. They've gone over 100 points in all of those games. I realize they're playing tin cans, but they're number one in shooting efficiency. And when I look at this roster, it's perfectly made for Nate Oates. He's got a floor general who can push the tempo, doesn't turn the ball over, facilitates. In Mark Sears, his Ohio transfer, he's playing at an all SEC level. But then he goes into the portal, and this is what's critical for any college basketball coach. You have to recruit, and you have to absolutely hit home runs in the portal. He goes to Hofstra and gets Aaron Estrada, who's a stat sheet stuffer, and he goes and gets a big that gives them toughness on the inside, and Grant Nelson from North Dakota State. And he is somebody who can really help them on the defensive glass. He has so far. And for that reason, when you mix in a little bit of toughness to a team that's already going to play high tempo up and down the floor, score a lot of points, I'm bullish on Alabama. I think they deserve all the flowers they're getting right now.
Got to have your eyes on the portal to be successful nowadays. Anthony, want to go to you for thoughts on Colorado.
Well, you know, Colorado football made so much noise the first month of the season. This Colorado basketball team might be a little bit more sustainable. There are some, immediate things that jump out when you look at how good this Colorado team has been. First of all, they're shooting 51.7% from 3. That's probably not going to continue. So yes, they've had some very impressive wins. They had a domination of Towson. They beat Grambling State and Milwaukee. They'll have a couple interesting tests this week against Richmond on Monday, especially. But I think, when you look at this roster, where could there be holes? I would have told you before the season that they weren't a great shooting team. And so the fact that they've gotten such good production out of their offensive shooting thus far has been kind of a surprise. Colorado's KJ Simpson, their point guard, junior guard, he's taken a huge leap this year. According to EvanMia.com, he has been the best player in the country by box plus minus, one of the most efficient offensive players, adding some good defensive value as well. Like I said, though, I think there is some regression coming for this Colorado team. They vaulted themselves into the top 20 in efficiency metrics. I think they're a very clear tournament team, but I think they're more of like a 8 to 9 seed type than they are this, top 20 ranked team. So I think we'll learn, they go to Colorado State in a couple of weeks for a big rivalry matchup with them. I think that's one spot where you may look to play against them if the market continues to get too hot on them after this hot shooting start. Either way, though, certainly some talent, and their offense has been really fun to watch thus far.
Well, maybe not as fun, but on the flip side, a couple teams that have struggled. Anthony, what do you make of Michigan State?
Yeah, I think Michigan State's kind of the classic example of people just assuming that, this team has a bunch of players returning, that they're just going to all take a leap, all going to get better, and we should now, put this team higher than maybe they should be. Michigan State made the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. They were a 7 seed, though, and they were a team that was, right around 30-ish, 35-ish in the efficiency metrics for the majority of last season. And that was while running pretty hot from 3. If you look at the shooting splits from last year's Michigan State team, they ran better from 3 than most if you look at the shot quality metrics. And this season has actually been the exact opposite. So they get this projected leap into the top 10, into the top 5 in a lot of the polls. The market gave them a lot of respect coming into the season, and it hasn't really come together. I mean, the core of this team is the same as last year. They have some freshmen that come in, highly ranked recruiting class. But we haven't really seen anybody pop necessarily to take that huge leap and really raise their ceiling. So I kind of think this is just the same team as last year, maybe marginally better, but a team that's right around the 20th best team in the country. And the market has, correctly kind of come down on them after they had, a terrible loss at home to James Madison. And then they, get beat by Duke in the Champions Classic. So I think they're still just like a good team, not a great team. But again, you look at the shooting splits, 16% from 3. They're not going to shoot that poorly, even though I do wonder just how many shooters are on this roster for them to space the floor. I think there's some real questions about that as we go forward.
Well, Mike, back over to you. Villanova, perhaps in that struggle category as well. What do you see from them?
So losing to Penn at the Palestra, obviously it looks bad on their resume, but the Palestra, it was electric. The whole crowd, once there was an opportunity for the underdog to win, was moving over to rooting for the Quakers. So I'm not going to bury him necessarily for that, but I'm putting a lot of emphasis on this game against Maryland tonight because Villanova had one major struggle that was kind of the antithesis of the way that they played under Jay Wright. They only had 6 assists in that game. They didn't share the basketball well. And even though I really like their roster top to bottom, they have an All-American candidate in Justin Moore. They have Bamba and Eric Dixon and a lot of good pieces, including the transfer from Richmond, Tyler Burton. Pieces are nice, but if they're not sharing the basketball and they're not playing cohesive as they had, in previous years under Wright, it could quickly snowball for a team that, is coming off one of its worst seasons in the last 10. So this Maryland game, I want to put extra emphasis on this and maybe give them a pass against Penn. If they win this by double digits at the ski lodge on campus at Villanova and they play well, then all of a sudden I think everything is right in the world. But if they lose this one outright, I think the sky may be falling on the main line.
Well, I think our friend Anthony might have a thing or two to say about whether or not Villanova will, in fact, win and win handily. Let's get your picks, Anthony.
Yeah, I like Nova tonight. I laid the 6. There is still 6 out there. 6.5 is fine for me. If you go back and look at the game again in the Palestra, yes, Penn pulled off a huge upset. Big rivalry, local matchup. Mike and I are both Philly guys, so we're a little partial to the Big Five. But Shot Quality graded that loss as a 16-point win for Villanova. They had a lot of good looks. They just didn't hit any of them, and that's college basketball, and that's part of the sport. And I think the market has kind of overreacted here. There are some real questions about how good this Maryland half-court offense is, and I think Villanova is going to put that to the test. Villanova is still very good. They have that Jay Wright identity of grinding you down, making you play in the half-court, making you execute there. And this Maryland team doesn't have a lot of shooting. They don't have a ton of ball movement. Their point guard play is inconsistent. They do turn it over a lot. So I think there's some problems for them. True road game tonight, too. Villanova at home at the Finn. I think they take advantage and are a little bit cheap here. Should be closer to 7.5 or 8. And, as I always say, it doesn't hurt to have elite free throw shooting when you're trying to cover these spreads. Nothing's worse than, your 5-point favorite. You're up 4 and your team can't hit a free throw to extend that lead. Villanova always great from the line. Top 3 in the country this year, top 5 last year. Very good free throw shooting team. Certainly helps trying to close out in a tight game situation that this could be. But I do like Nova here laying the points. Think that Maryland's offense just doesn't do enough in the half court and won't get the chance to run, which is where they're at their best.
Well, at the top, we mentioned another game, St. Mary's and San Diego State. Mike, you have a pick on this one. What is it?
So this one opened as the Gales catching a point. It's moved all the way to St. Mary's laying 1.5 points. And this is a rare buy low situation on a St. Mary's team that's been one of the best mid-majors in college basketball for well over a decade under Randy Bennett. They lose to the Big Sky favorite Weber State team, and Weber State led by Dylan Jones, who's going to be a millionaire at some point in the future, whether he's playing overseas or in the NBA. The guy is incredible, 6'6", 235, can beat you inside, outside. He had a huge game. And St. Mary's best player, Aiden Mahaney, who shot 40% from 3 last year, goes 2 for 10 from long range. And as DeBundo said, that's just the breaks in college basketball. Sometimes that happens. Positive regression time for Mahaney in a spot against San Diego State, where I'm still leery that they have enough offensive firepower to win in the half court. You look at what they did last year, riding a hot streak all the way to the national championship game. Now it all kind of falls on the shoulders of Jaden Ledee. And for somebody who was mainly a rotational player at Ohio State, TCU, and then transferring into San Diego State, now all of a sudden he has to be a high usage superstar type player for the Aztecs to win against quality opponents like this. I don't necessarily see it. Mitchell Saxon's going to get thrown at him. Harry Wessels as well. Those are 2 really big defenders who also are going to hurt San Diego State on the offensive glass. So I view this as St. Mary's anywhere up to -3, right to the edge of that one possession. I think they're the play here in Las Vegas tonight.
Love it. Well, this time it's Breeze that's going to stick around to talk college football, but we'll say see ya to Anthony. Thanks, pal. From the hardwood to the gridiron, Boise State is favored at Utah State Saturday. Utah State getting the slight majority of bets, but 78% of money. And new number 1 Georgia laying double digits against 18-ranked Tennessee. The Bulldogs are getting 86% of both bets and money. Back back here with Calabrese. So you are with the public on the side of Utah State. Give us your reasoning.
So this is an eligible between 2 5-5 teams. The winner gets to that 6-win threshold. They punch their ticket for a bowl game. So everything is on the line here for Utah State at home. And the home field advantage is important here in Logan, Utah. Maverick Stadium has always been a friendly confine to the Aggies. Dating back to 2012, they're the most profitable team against the spread at home in the Mountain West Conference. And this year they're 4-1. But when, the casual gambler is looking at this, 2 5-5 teams, how different could they be? Utah State has been on the cusp. They scored 14 points against Iowa, no small task. James Madison, they were within 7. Fresno State, they played them to a 5-point loss. So they've been right on the cusp, and now they're surging at the right time. 73 points in the last 2 weeks. They're up to 16th in aerial explosives thanks to Cooper Lega and their really deep receiving core of Royals, Vaughn, and Micah Davis, up against a Boise State defense that's 109th in explosives allowed. And by the way, as an added bonus, Boise State's fallen apart. They fired their coach. Their receiving core is in disarray. Everyone's either hurt or has entered the portal. And their best player, Ashton Genty, hasn't played in weeks. He is practicing, but he's got a big, bulky knee brace on his injured knee. So if he doesn't play really well, I don't think they can keep pace with Utah State. I actually think the wrong team's favored here. So I'll take the plus 140 money line and run up to the window and place that bet.
Sounds good. Okay, to the Power 5 matchup, riding with the public again on Georgia. Why is this the right side?
So Kirby Smart, as the head coach of the University of Georgia, has covered 65% of his games when facing ranked opponents. He knows how to get into the heads of his players. He knows how to motivate in these spots. It's the best against the spread record in the SEC since 2016 and second among Power 5 programs. So these are the moments that he lives for, to be able to say that these are our platform games. This is when the nation's looking at us. They generally play their best. Josh Heupel on the other side for Tennessee in these spots against ranked opponents, 6-8 against the spread. And when facing ranked teams at home as an underdog, 1-3 against the spread. So I'm going to go here with the Georgia team that I think is just the class of the conference. And Carson Beck, their quarterback, he's just ascending. He was not touched, not one time last week against Ole Miss. And because of that, he's played incredibly well in SEC play. His QBR averages out to 87 in conference. And I think that just speaks to how good he's been. And, oh, by the way, Brock Bowers now back healthy, ready to roll, scored a touchdown in his return from surgery last week. I think he's going to be too much for Tennessee to handle in this old school SEC rivalry.
Should be a nice boost to Georgia's resume, particularly with regard to playoff hopes. Mike, thank you so much.
Thanks, Maria.
From college to NBA, a brand new episode of our podcast Buckets is out now. I join Matt Moore to discuss who should be the title favorite, the Celtics or Nuggets, and a whole lot more. But of course, there's a full slate tonight. So, Sean Little, how well are you seeing the board?
I just feel like I'm seeing the board really well. And if you go back and watch the end of the Bulls Magic in Game 1 at the United Center, the way the Bulls closed the game, I was very encouraged by. We talked about this duplex spot in a trend that is absolutely undeniable. All right, so the home favorite after coming off a loss in the second game of a duplex spot is 32-12 straight up. That's 72.7%. 26-17-1 against the spread. That's 60% with an average line of 6 points. This is a pick'em. This is -1 for the Bulls at home. It is absolute desperation time. Just they are in dire need of a win. Billy Donovan, the whole crew. DeMar DeRozan is still questionable coming into this game. If he came in, I would love that bump as well. He's dealing with some personal issues, but DeMar, no DeMar, with that trend and the way they close the game, I like this spot. It's tough to beat a team back-to-back nights in their building. I think the Bulls overall have the talent that can compete in this very nuanced spot. I'll lay the point and take the Bulls at home.
Coming up this weekend on Action Network, don't miss BBOC Saturday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. The Power Hour with Convince Me and the Touchdown Show starting at 11 a.m. Sunday, and the favorites just before Sunday Night Football. And in case you missed any of our great content from the past week, here are some highlights.
This is a team, we haven't really mentioned all that much. Like, just kidding, New Mexico State plus 24. Diego. I'm not getting off this train. They are the second most profitable team against the spread in the whole country. Hey, Stuckey, pull the car over, turn this off, put it on country or, some other station, because right now we are talking about the Aggies. Guns up in Las Cruces.
I'm gonna go with Josh Dobbs in the captain spot. I think he's a fun captain play because it makes a lot of sense because he's been running so much. He's averaging 7.5 carries for 56 yards on the ground with 1 touchdown per game in his 2 games with the Vikings. And, maybe he runs a bit less if Jefferson comes back and whatnot, and, more guys are open. But I do think he's going to run quite a bit.
Dallas is hot right now, and they looked really good last week. And I totally get why you don't want to do it. Got to take this spot. Like, over long term, Chad just told you the numbers. You make this bet the rest of your life in this exact spot with this number and this kind of matchup, you will be profitable long term. And that's what we're trying to teach here. So I want to make this big balls, Chad. You with me?
Let's do it. I'm with you. Big balls, bet of the week, Carolina Panthers.
Is Tommy DeVito a virgin? Like, serious question.
Can't say that.
Oh.
Can't say that. No way we can say that. There's
It's a legitimate question. He lives at home with his parents.
I live at home with my parents. There's nothing wrong with it.
Wait a second. Hold on. 1 second.
Exactly. That's why
I'm not going to elaborate on what Ray Bond just said. But,
Actually.
but
now
Tim,
we're on to something.
wait a minute. Tim, did you cross over with DeVito at Syracuse?
I did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe you have any inklings of what Ray Bond's talking about?
I don't know, but Tool, all-time Tool bag Hall of Fame, Tommy DeVito.
I thought you were talking about me.
Remember, any picks we give out here on the show, you can easily reference by following Green Dot Daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. You can hang out with the Action Network crew Sunday, December 3rd in Hoboken, New Jersey at the Shepherd and the Knucklehead from 4 to 9:30 p.m. as we do a live broadcast of the Favorites podcast with Chad Millman and Simon Hunter. Go to eventbrite.com and search the Favorites pod or hit the link below to RSVP. That concludes another week of Green Dot Daily. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks so much for hanging with me. Hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you back here Monday at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube channel and the Action app.